adjourn now, go across the road.
Oh, for that prezzo, okay. So we've got Hastings Central Business Association. Waiting patiently there.
That's all right. I'm early, so that's fine.
So it's part
Susan McDade.
part two, page I-15. Page 2, part 2, page I-15.
Just very close proximity there. So welcome. You've been watching a bit of the proceedings. You know how we do it. If you wish us to ask you questions, please give us time in your 10 minutes, which is underway. There you go.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Susan McDade, and for those of you that know me, I will be uncharacteristically brief today. I just wish to submit on Tourism Hawke's Bay's submission for extra funding. Obviously, you've got our submission. It's quite succinct there. Just to add to that, I'd just like to say that we feel at the Business Association that Tourism Hawke's Bay currently is underfunded comparatively with some of the other regions that are doing quite a bit better than us. I think outside of Hawke's Bay, and this is from my own experience as well, we're known for the Mission Concert and to potentially a lesser extent the Art Deco. Other than that, there's really probably a very low understanding or knowledge of the amazing things that go on here in Hawke's Bay and what's on offer here. We live in the best place in New Zealand, and I have looked everywhere, so that's why I live here as well. We just don't sell it very well at all. And it's, you know, I'm quite sick of living in the province that underperforms in so many areas. So I think that this is a real opportunity that we have to get out there, sell tourism to the rest of the country and overseas to a much more, a higher standard, more appropriate to the resource that we've actually got here. I've been part of the focus group that's worked on this seasonal strategy. And I really, the thing that really appeals to me from the Hastings City Business Association hat that I wear is that it is a very inclusive strategy. It really talks to all of the regions in Hawke's Bay, not just Napier, which has most of our tourism assets in the moment, but it is a chance for the rest of the province to really get out there and put what we do and link that into this wider strategy. So when we're going out there to the world, selling Hawke's Bay, then there's that little piece that we can jump onto as well and actually start to get a little bit more leverage for the rest of the regions, including Wairoa, Central Hawke's Bay, who have great assets but really get forgotten because there isn't enough money to go around, really. It also appeals inclusively to the different demographics. We've got an amazingly rich Maori culture here, and it's huge. And coming from, well, I'm actually a Kiwi, believe it or not, but moving from another country back to New Zealand, it's one of our most fantastic, fabulous, sexy, wonderful things to sell is that cultural aspect. It's what people really want to see, and it's almost non-existent. We have great assets here, but we're just not letting that story get out there. The one thing that I would add to my submission, and this is definitely coming from our board, is that we would like some more proportional representation. If the people of Hastings are contributing to that level, to this increased spend, we really want to see more emphasis away from emphasis on their existing tourism assets here in Napier, but also for the rest of the provinces. And Hastings, I think, really gets probably the short shaft on that one, both in the district. The CBD really probably gets not much. Until we have things to sell in a really big way, I can understand that won't be there. But we don't want to be forgotten as well if we're contributing to that. So are there any questions?
I've got one to kick it off. Thank you for that. You're coming to us to talk about us increasing target rate. What's been your message to Hastings District Council?
I've had quite a lot of very loud messages to council, especially in the last 6 months. We've really put our expectations are very clear with them, especially around the marketing plan, both for the CBD and the district. I think Hastings is very poorly marketed. We've got some real brand issues. And that goes to events, sports, and tourism as well. So we do have quite high expectations, but I think that this is a regional and an external message that we're talking about with this submission. So it's beyond what any of the 5 councils can really do on their own. This really does need to be the umbrella organisation leading this as a combined strategy. So when you see that message, you know it's Hawke's Bay, and you know that you really should be going this weekend maybe.
I like that. I'll just start down here with Councillor Hewitt.
Thanks, Susan. I'm going to throw you a different question, because you're coming at this from a marketing angle and telling your story, which I really like. So how would you suggest we as councillors even contemplate selling this story if we're looking at an economic development rate of which the majority of the proportion of the rate that we're speaking about, 1.75 million, is going directly onto tourism, and the rest of the economic development rate is just a little minuscule pocket? So how might you suggest we as councillors sell that story on?
And that is why I am not a councillor. It is a really, really tough one, and I think that tourism is only one little pocket of money that's coming into Hawke's Bay. We have a myriad of problems. I work really closely with Hastings Council's economic development team with the Great Things Grow Here project, amongst a lot of other things. It's very exciting times because I see that we actually are getting quite a bit of progress in that area. It's a very difficult one. I don't have the answer for that regionally, but we have to do better than what we have been doing in the past. Businesses should want to come and set up in Hawke's Bay just for the lifestyle alone, but the infrastructure, everything, there's so many reasons to do it. And I'm just failing to see the reasons why it's not, other than we probably haven't asked them.
Councillor Scott.
Put your Hastings marketing hat back on and tell me, what could tourism do for Hastings and its people? So outside just the tourists using the accommodation.
Yeah. Well, I think that if you look at where the great tourism assets are in Hawke's Bay, a very large amount of them are actually in the Hastings district, so Tamata Peak and Splash Planet and all of those sorts of things as well. But I think when people think of Hawke's Bay and they think of Napier as the destination to come to, they don't actually ever think of Hastings. When they get here, they get directed over to Hastings to all of these things, but it's not sold that way. For me, I don't think it actually matters as long as they get there and they spend their money. But I think that coming from outside of Hawke's Bay, I didn't move to Napier. Oh, I live here. I moved to Hawke's Bay. And that's the point that we don't get locally here. And I think that if we're selling all of Hawke's Bay and you're picking up on all of those things in Waro and Lake Waikaremoana and, the festivals in Central Hawke's Bay and those things, it doesn't actually matter about these individual little things. They're too little anyways.
My question is, increased tourism, what does that mean for the rest of the business and everyone else?
It means people on the street. It means dollars in the pocket. If more people come, stay longer, spend more, that's the point. And that's really on a smaller scale, what we're trying to do within Hastings CBD. My job's not to bring in more stores. My job is to bring people onto the street to sell.
Councillor Pipe.
You know about the strategy because you're involved in it. How much of a game changer do you think that seasonal strategy is going to be?
I think it's a major game changer. It's interesting, it's different, it's something you haven't seen before, and it is what we are. Hawke's Bay is those 4 seasons, and I think that and if you start to lump that in and really get down to the heart of it, which I'm sure you're all doing, I think it will be hugely game-changing. For me, it makes sense. I'm not a marketing person. Everyone keeps saying that, but it just speaks to what we're trying to sell. It's us.
Final question somewhere. No further questions. Thank you very much. and we'll be in touch in a very short while. Good luck. Thank you. So I'll take you back to the internal submission, which we left in limbo. Which was on page 4, which is the Regional Land Science Research. And I think Councillor Scott and Councillor Bevan, from memory, both had questions. So,
Yeah, I'll start. This is the largest.
just hang on, order, guys.
This is the largest carry forward parcel of money that we're going to be dealing with here today. And it's to do with completing science, which underpins the tank process. And I don't really understand why such a significant piece of work has not yet been completed. Have our scientific resources been diverted elsewhere, or what's the actual reason for this?
No. So it's a case of knowing that we'd lost some time ago our key modeller in this space, and we were going through a process of replacing him. We've actually replaced him with 2 people, and in doing so, you bring with it new understanding and new capability. So the person who came into us brought a completely different understanding and set of experience around groundwater modelling, in particular in the software and what's available and what we might be able to utilise. So as a result of that, we kind of shifted our thinking and direction around the platform we were going to use for the ground and surface water model. And as a result of that, it opened up then the opportunity to explore further the ability to bolt on this contaminant transport model instead of having to build our own from scratch. So I actively encouraged the team to work systematically and carefully through those options rather than diving in and spending the money simply because it was in the budget for a contaminant transport model until they'd considered all the options thoroughly, gone back in and checked with the technical advisory panel and the technical advisory group just to sound off and check that what we were thinking about was the right way to go before we dived into or committed to a particular course of action. So hence that sort of changeover in staff and rethinking about what the platforms were and what options were available has created the delay. Like I say, I actively encourage them to pause and think carefully through it and to check in with those groups that I'd talked to Councillor Balfour about, just to make sure that what we were doing was going to be the best we could possibly do for the catchment.
Okay, so we're living with a consequence of all of that. We're living with a delay.
Yes.
Are you satisfied with the replacement methodology, because that's really what you're talking about?
Yes, I am, and more.
We're going to get better bang for our buck as a consequence.
Yep, and more importantly, so are the advisory groups. That's what they're saying. So I'm comfortable this is the best way to go. And look, I don't believe this is going to be a major delay at all, if at all, for us. The reality is that we would have had to have spent this sort of money and potentially a lot more to build our own contaminant transport model, and probably wouldn't be ready to go any sooner anyway, because not only would you have to build the model, you then have to go about collecting the right data to run it, to make it work properly. So, yeah.
Councillor Scott.
Taking that one step further with my questions, and backwards, the mod HMS model, I presume, was not around and in use 3 or 4 years ago when we started the modelling on the Rotanova.
I'm not sure how long it's been around. Look, Mod Flow, which was the package we built the Rotanova model out with, it was. Whether Mod HMS was, I'm not sure. One of the fundamental issues with Mod HMS is that it's not publicly available software. Mod Flow, anybody in this room could download it and run a groundwater model if you had the right expertise. Mod HMS you can't, but Mod HMS brings with it sophistication and technology that Mod Flow doesn't. So that was one of the key things we checked in with the technical advisory group to say, look, under the existing setup, we could build a model and you could push it out to somebody sitting at home watching TV to run a model if they thought they were up to it. And their advice was no, actually the people running those models are people who are going to have access to mod HMS, and so it doesn't sort of isolate anybody by going to this model soft platform, but it elevates your sophistication and your ability to model quite fundamentally. So hence we decided we would compromise with the kind of open access or freely available concept to getting a much more refined model.
And having moved to that, from what I can read, is that for a tank will actually be probably running grounding of the model sooner than if we'd stuck with building a mod flow approach, trim model, whatever you want to call it.
Well, yeah, trim effectively is a bespoke model that effectively it's an Excel spreadsheet model.
If we'd gone with a bespoke model for the tank catchment area, rather than bringing this in, we'll actually be modelling through it at a sooner rather than later date.
Well, I think so, because the issue with trim is that it took some time to develop and create, and it was continually evolving, right up to the final sort of stages. We won't have that to the same extent. There'll still be some specific catchment-specific development required, but largely the brains, if you like, and the architecture behind it already exists. So we don't start with a zero baseline. We've got a bunch of processes and architecture and algorithms we'll just pick up and use and make them catchment specific. So we're already reasonably well ahead. And I guess more fundamentally is that there is a degree of comfort within those people who have an interest in this, whether you're in the primary sector or in the environmental space, that's a good way to go. We like this modelling approach.
Just clarify one around that. One of the criticisms of trim was around whether it was fully fit for purpose. Are we overcoming that with this one?
Well, just to be clear, trim is fit for purpose for a number of things in the catchment.
I did say fully.
Sure. And again, that's exactly the same issue that we're confronting here to ensure that it is fit for purpose. And our view and the view of the advisory groups is that it will be fit for purpose once we've populated
Fully.
it with data. Well, I'll go back
It won't be
to...
open to the areas of criticism that the trim was.
Look, I'm not going to guarantee it's not going to be open to criticism, because I think it would be naive to expect any of these things to go through completely unchallenged. I guess what we've said is that we've gone through kind of a no stone unturned approach, and we've tried to be inclusive about how we've gone about building these things and how we're going to populate them and work them, so that at the very least we might get to the point where people say it's a good model, fit for purpose, and we like or accept the numbers that come out of it. Then the interpretation around what you deal with those numbers, I expect, will be quite different. But if we can get to the point where people aren't arguing whether it's 10 or 15 that comes out just for the sake of a number out of the model, that's a good step forward. Issues of interpretation, I think you'll always have, and the reality is that as we learn more and we gather more and understand more and get more data on, we will always have the ability to improve these models and make them go better and give a more sort of precise estimate around reality.
Any further questions on that particular item?
Listening to all this, I would like to foreshadow in a way that I think there is some concern, whether it's materializing in the technical advisory group or not, I don't know, because I don't participate in that group. But it doesn't have to do with the model, as I said earlier. It has to do with the field work, that is the term I would use, that would support the model in terms of what empirical knowledge we have of the groundwater situation in particular, and what it's based on, as the prelude to then what gets fed into this model. And if $231,000 would be enough money to satisfy concerns that might arise over the next couple of months with respect to what I've just said, that's okay. But if it were to materialize that maybe we needed to spend another couple of $100,000 on field work to get the proper data inputs, is that money available within existing budgets, or is that something that would have to be contemplated as an additional expenditure?
So rolling into the new financial year, we would have our existing budgets for the programs and these projects, and off the top of my head, I can't remember how much it is for the groundwater model development in terms of those components. Look, the views of the team doing the work is that this is adequate to do the job, so they've got enough to do the job. In terms of what the concerns are around the components, I mean, you know, look, it's a bit like I'm kind of boxing shadows here at the moment because I'm not sure what you're talking about in particular, other than to say and reiterate that a groundwater model is made up of a number of components, things like the underlying geology, what the recharge is, what your rainfall component of the recharge is, you know, what your spring flows are, what your river flows are. All of those things are components of the model. All of those elements have been discreetly considered by the technical advisory panel. So if you like, the brains trust in an academic sense to say, is this good enough? Is it?
That's the magic word, the academic brain.
Yep. So that's the technical advisory panel. And then there's also a technical advisory group, which is made up of stakeholders and parties who aren't necessarily academics in this space. Some of them are actually as part of the advisory group. Some of the GNS scientists who we have in the advisory group are. They're brought there specifically for their groundwater modelling expertise. But there's also tangata whenua, green groups, primary sector interests with a reasonable level of technical understanding to kick the tyres and say, is this good enough? And ask the questions. That's been the very point of that group. And the science team is then responding to the issues or concerns that they are raising to advance or refine or redirect their work to deal with the issues as they arise. And like I say, at the moment, there are no issues, concerns, showstoppers, whatever, that any of those groups are bringing forward as we're doing this work. So without any more detail in terms of what the issues are and what people are concerned about, I couldn't tell you for absolute sure whether this deals with those issues. And it may be that the issues that are being raised might just be because people aren't aware of what's going on already and what we're gathering and what is new, because we are doing a bunch of new work around this. We aren't relying on pre-existing information. There's been a lot of money spent on a lot of new information.
Right, let's move on then. Air quality.
Well, I've got the
Be
floor.
Back to you.
So again, this is kind of a bit of a strategic approach as well as a timing issue. The PCE had noted in her view around air quality that PM 2.5 was something that probably should be considered in an NES review, and we know, we've heard just very recently that MFE are definitely conducting a review of the NES, and it's highly likely PM 2.5 will end up in the NES. We don't know any more detail
Can we just
on
have
that.
an explanation of what it is?
Oh, sorry. So PM 2.5 is just a finer particulate material, a pollutant in the atmosphere that's finer than PM 10. So it's 2.5 microns instead of 10 microns. So it's just a lot finer.
And are we not currently measuring that?
No. So our monitoring equipment is set up to collect PM 10 data, but not PM 2.5.
So is there anything to suggest that we have a problem with 2.5?
Not at the moment because we haven't monitored it. But this retrofit of our systems and sites will give us a much better coverage of the region to say, do we have a problem and where is it and what's causing it. So hence the desire to go and retrofit the monitoring gear and the sites to pick this up.
And are we anticipating a change in the monitoring requirement, or are we reacting?
We're anticipating a change because I think the signals are, both from what we're hearing from MFE as well as the PCE's recommendations, that that's probably going to come down the track.
Right, we're going to